The Ten of Swords, Ruin, is a card concerned with the end of a journey and the inevitability of its decay in the physical world. It is not as entirely without hope as what it may first appear, and yet this is a card certainly associated with that element of the end, as we can see. On the Rider-Waite card, a very physical image of death, the end of this conflict of which we have seen throughout these cards, is displayed here graphically for us to see. His life's blood runs cold upon the ground. The sun sets and the journey is over. On the Tree of Life we are Malkuth in Yetzirah, and so we find ourselves well and truly in that world of formation, the furthest away from Kether, and finding ourselves basically in a world where it is ruled by decay and endings, a spiralling of things coming into being and fading away. Astrologically, we are the Sun in Gemini, and this is rather interesting as the Sun plays somewhat of a pivotal role in this card, suggesting a hidden light of hope running throughout it. But with the Sun in Gemini, the energy of Gemini waters down the light of the Sun, and so the general idea with people of whom are Sun in Gemini in astrology is that their moods change quickly, and yet when their mood is on something they are very passionate about it, but only for a short period of time. It's absolutely within the realm of the intellect, which is the seeing and holding and touching of things in the physical world. Of course, all of those things in the physical world are prone to this element of decay and of endings. They won't last forever. Upon the card we can see this, the background of the card has this quite fierce looking red and orange. It's almost quite unpleasant. It looks rather hot, sharp, like it's sucking us in. This is the colour of Mars, and it shows that the elements associated with Mars, which could be war of course and misfortune, that type of thing, have shown themselves in our lives. And Mars, however, isn't actually the dominant energy here. We're going to see Saturn as well, and so the whole background of the card is showing that all of the conflict we have seen has caught up with us in the end. So if we've lived by the sword, like we've seen on the Rider-Waite card, our character here has died by the sword as well. And so all of the swords on the Ten of Swords are arranged in the patterns of which we would see upon the Tree of Life, and they all have different symbols upon them. And so in the space of Kether here at the top, we can see the set of scales. The scales, of course, are Libra. This is perhaps of the greatest importance with this card, as people will naturally think this is a very grim and morbid card, and it can be in many ways, and yet it represents something of a balance, in that we can't actually grow if things don't come to an end. Sometimes we have to allow something to end in order for something new to begin, and Crowley himself talks about this card in the Book of Thoth. He says it's not completely without hope. Out of the fire rises the phoenix, and we must be able to lift ourselves up when we have nothing. And so that is the scales there shown at the top. Libra is also exalted in Saturn, and so we're seeing Saturn, Father Time, and of course with it death and endings. We can see that carried on with the next symbols, of which are in the space of Shokmar and Binar on the Tree of Life, and these have upon them an hourglass. This is the symbol held by Father Time, of whom is the personification of Saturn. It's the time running out, the suggestion of impermanence in our lives and in all of the things around us. Just as castle ruins were once the centre of wealth and extravagance, and would stand up upon the horizon as a statement of the ruling powers of the day, they now sit crumbling and forgotten, home only to passing birds and whistling winds. These hourglasses, however, also show a symbol of the compass around them. Of course, in Freemasonry we see the compass. It's perhaps the most well-known Masonic symbol, and in simple terms it represents self-restraint, one's ability to rein in his wants and yearnings, choose things even if he doesn't want them in that exact moment in order to live a balanced life. And so it's balance. The castle ruin sits as it is in ruin, because otherwise we would still be in the Wars of the Roses or something. It is balanced. It has risen to power and crumbled away. The next symbol in the space of Geberah and Chesed is the Tau cross. Now this has a great many symbolic meanings to it, and yet here it's in reference to the Tau as the final letter in the Hebrew alphabet, and so it has the association with that end of the journey. As the last letter of the alphabet, it is the final destination of the things around us, carved up in the alphabet of form, coming from thought. Of course, the letters are simply a way of which we express ourselves. And so as the last letter, it shows that all the things around us will eventually decay, they'll stop working, be thrown away, or rot, be forgotten and cover in dust. Yet even this rather miserable symbol has something of hope to it. The Tau was marked upon the forehead by Ezekiel of those chosen by God, and St. Francis of Assisi originally signed his letters not with his name but with the Tau symbol, and this reminds us of St. Francis saying, as he did, "Let us begin again." And so we understand that those things around us have to die for us to be free of them and to start again. This can simply mean that something which once meant a great deal to us now means very little to us, because perhaps we've outgrown it, or we've simply got all of the joy that we could get from it, and so it has to die. It has to leave our experience, essentially, for us to move on from it and having learned from it. And so the next symbols show what would happen if we didn't. These are in the space of Hod and Netzach, and these are quite sharp and very dangerous looking swords. They are pronged. They could harm their user just as much as those of whom they are used against. They also show something of those pinwheels of the mind and the restriction of them. They even look somewhat like Saturn in a way, and so it's that turning of the mind and that refusal to move on, that refusal to let those things in our mind die so that we can begin again. And that of course would keep us in a very poor state and would cause damage to us, and we can see that the actual central sword here is very much damaged, and we'll come back to that in a little while. The next symbol down, we see these two swords next to each other. The symbol in the space of Yesod is the sun. This is the symbol that shows that there's so much hope still in the card. It's not as miserable as what we would have hoped, because as Crowley says, the solar influence rules here, and so destruction can never be complete. So when something dies, it does begin again, like we saw with the Tau, like we've seen all the way around it. It's the dark night and the breaking through of the sun from the clouds in the morning, and underneath that we can actually see us. The final symbol here in the symbol of Malkuth in the physical world is a pentagram with a lunar crescent underneath it, and so the pentagram of course is us. It is spirit animating matter, those 4 points there being the things which make up that physical world, or the 4 elements, and the other point is spirit entering matter with the breath of life. The lunar crescent is the subconscious. It's those fears that we've had, of which we see in the moon card, of which have come out and started to manifest into the physical world, and so in the world of the day has leaked over something of the night, if you want to look at it in a poetic way. So essentially your fears have finally overtook you and caused this damage of which we see, and yet amongst all this damage may be seen the true hidden meaning in this card. The central sword, which is in the position of Tifereth, the Sephiroth of where the most paths cross through, is here shown as the heart. And we can see that the sword has actually been physically broken by all of this pressure and destruction. And yet, the bottom swords here, those representing things such as the mind and the sun and the power of ourself, is actually holding the heart in place. It's like it's literally pinning it down and holding it. And we remember when Crowley described this card as finding the ability to lift ourselves up even when we have nothing. Well, this really shows the hope that is present in this card. The things around us may decay, fall away and die. We may simply outgrow certain things, or we may experience them for a while and then feel that it's time to move on. And yet, behind all of these changing things is something which does not change, and that is our heart. That is the spark of love within them. And if we follow Thelema, we are introduced to this concept of true will, and that if we strip away all of the illusions of the world, all of those physical things in the world of which die and which decay, what is left after all of these illusions and pieces of trickery of which we have picked up from the world are discarded is that heart, that true love, that passion and that purpose behind them all. And so, as he says there in the Book of Thoth, lift it up as it is shown on the card, lift up your heart, and you should be able to move on from this situation. The card in itself could be a fear, it could be an actual physical loss of possessions and things around us, and so it's asking us to find the true meaning of them behind their physical form. We have to regain that balance of the heart against this backdrop of physical destruction, of which must be in some ways in order for these things to happen in the first place. And then we shall find wisdom coming through our experience of pain, outliving our loss and our destruction, because the heart will always be lifted up and will always be there.